Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to 500 Seconds on Wrestling. I am your host, David Gibb. That's DAVIDGIBB. On Twitter, at Dave Writes Junk. That's at symbol Dave, as in my name, Writes, as in that thing you do with a pencil, and junk, as in a Chinese sailing vessel. This is episode 2 of our podcast. Last week, in our first installment, I was joined by my close friend and blogger, Nick Bond. We talked about Seth Rollins. If you want to hear that show, you can go back in the archive to listen to it. You can either find it streaming on our blog, on our YouTube account, 500 on Wrestling, or on the iTunes store if you just search 500 on Wrestling. This week, I am going to be flying solo, and my topic for the day is NXT. NXT has been one of my favorite shows to cover ever since I started the blog back in the winter. I find it, a consistently entertaining show. But after watching this week, I've started to feel like it may be losing its way a little. For the sake of clarity, since I'm not exactly sure when people are going to be listening to this, I'm going to be speaking today about NXT episode 286, which originally aired on July the 8th of 2015. I just kind of want to go through the show segment by segment, bit by bit, from top to bottom, and talk about what's not working, or at least what's not working as well as it used to on the show. So the show opened with the women's segment, which featured NXT Women's Champion Sasha Banks, Charlotte, Dana Brooke, and Emma. One of the things that always really made the NXT women's division work and made it far better than the WWE Divas was the fact that there were really clear faces and heels. Watching this week's show, I feel like that's eroded a bit. Dana is clearly a heel. Emma is a heel in as much as she failed as a babyface, so now she's deciding to be mean. But I was really, really confused with what was going on with Sasha, and that's not good because she's the champion. She's supposed to be one of the centerpieces of the show. Suddenly, she feels like a tough babyface just because another strong heel, Dana, is there. She and Charlotte got a strong babyface win and a strong babyface reaction, but then the show kind of instantly shifted towards building their title match. This is confusing because when you're building towards a title match, it should never be unclear who's the heel and who's the babyface. It felt very Attitude Era-ish, and I do not mean that as a compliment. I mean it in the sense that there was just kind of chaos. Okay, they're friends right now, but now they're going to be against each other, and over the next few weeks, we're going to see them tear each other down, even though we just saw the harmony between them. So I just didn't like it. I felt like they were getting away from what had made the NXT women's division special and better than the Divas division. After that, they showed a replay of the Finn Balor-Kevin Owens NXT title match from Beast in the East. I was really confused when I saw this come on because, why replay it? This just feels like filler on a C show. I know that some folks are watching NXT on Hulu, and so they might not have the network and may not have access to Beast of the East, but the vast majority of people who watch NXT are network subscribers. So, in my opinion, it would have just been better for them to maybe show a few highlights and say, hey, this is available to you on the network, go check it out. It just seemed silly to replay it, especially since it was an edited version, and the edited version of the match was not nearly as good. It edited out most of the heat, where Kevin Owens was really working over Balor, and they edited out Balor's first big false finish, the first time he hit the coup de grace. I was really surprised by that. It was kind of jarring to me watching the edited version of the match, because I knew that he had hit the finish once before earlier, and it just wasn't there. I thought that really what they did is they took a pay-per-view quality match, they edited it, they put a commercial break in it, and they really just lowered it down to the quality of a normal television match. They took something really special, and they made it less special. Not a good thing to do on television. Don't get me wrong, I loved the match, and I loved the angle. I've written tons over the last month on 500onwrestling.com, tons that I'm actually very proud of about this angle and match. I think both of them are tremendous workers. I think it was a great story, but editing it, shortening it, changing the context of it really was jarring and just was not a good look. Afterwards, the show shifted back to the NXT arena for Solomon Crowe versus Marcus Louis. This was a competitive match that should have been a squash. It really kind of felt like something you would have seen on SmackDown in like 2007 or 2008, where you had an upper mid-carder having a way too competitive match against a lower card guy. There was a full minute of this match that just should not have existed, and that was when Louis had Crow in sort of a combo abdominal stretch and claw hold. I timed it out. It did go on for a full minute, and it just didn't need to be there because the goal of this match was to get Solomon Crow over, and it's just not clear to me how a minute-long mat hold coming from a jobber does that. I know that you need the heat to build the comeback, but I mean, is Marcus Louis really anybody capable of generating heat? And was Crow's comeback really spirited enough to make it all worth it? I don't think so. The icing on the cake was afterwards the announcers did the typical WWE thing of saying, "Oh, what an impressive victory for Solomon Crow." It's like, really? Was it? I don't think so. Just felt like kind of a throwaway match. If the goal was to elevate him to anything higher than he already is, I think it was a failure. So moving on to the kind of nominal main event of the show, and I want to hit on that just conceptually, because you already had a world title match, and I know that it was a pre-taped world title match, and this is kind of somehow quote-unquote more live or more new in terms of content than the title match, but I mean, I think the title always needs to be on last. It's supposed to be the be-all, end-all for these guys. So we had the Vaudevillains versus Enzo Amore and Colin Cassidy. This was kind of a case of who are the cool kids going to root for, right? Because NXT, since its inception, has kind of relied on that smart mark crowd to get guys over, and these were both acts that at times had been crowd favorites. The crowd popped for both of their entrances, and then they were pretty tepid throughout the whole match. The Vaudevillains took the heel role, isolating Enzo, trying to get the heat on him, and the crowd were clapping for his comeback, and then when he finally got that hot tag to Colin Cassidy, there was like almost no reaction for Cass coming into the ring, and then he just kind of stood there and did his deal where people run at him and he throws them down. It was not very effective. I try not to be critical of wrestling quality unless it's high, unless I'm complimenting it when I talk about NXT, just because I know, it's mostly there as developmental territory. But I don't know, I feel like Cassidy has gotten to the point where he's kind of noticeably bringing down Enzo Amore. I thought there was a very insightful, maybe too insightful moment from Corey Graves on commentary. He said, "Blake and Murphy represent the company very well. Here you've got some guys who aren't sure what decade it is, and you've got a couple of loudmouths who never shut up." Exactly. That's the problem. Why should I want either of these teams to win? So then when the finish finally comes and the Vaudevillains win, there's just this really disappointing pop. It's like they weren't over enough as baby faces. They didn't have enough of the cool kids to get a really strong reaction, but just enough people liked them that they didn't get the negative reaction they needed to get over as heels either. It just wasn't effective. Overall, I find it tough to give this show anything higher than a C- grade as a whole, which is really sad because there was sort of a butchered portion of an A+ match in the very middle of it. If you're looking for kind of a theme or a big takeaway in my review here, I think it's that one of the things that's really damaging NXT right now is that they're not real clear about who are the heels and who are the baby faces in both the women's division with the opening match and in the tag team division with the closing match. Luckily, the talent's still there. The creative forces that were putting on just a tremendous show about 6 months ago are all still there. So I would say all these problems are fixable. But what they really need to do at NXT is start leading the crowd instead of listening to the crowd so much. Obviously, you want to have your ears open to your fans and be sensitive to what they like, what they don't like, what they want to see, what they don't want to see. But don't let them call the shots. Don't let the cool kids run the whole cafeteria. It kind of seems like that's what's happened, and the show has gotten away from the people behind it a little bit. That's going to do it for me for this edition of 500 Seconds on Wrestling. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please keep spreading the word if you did. Make sure to follow me at Dave Writes Junk on Twitter. Make sure to follow the blog at 500 on Wrestling, 500 on Wrestling as well. I hope this show brought some joy to your day. Just knowing that you exist brought some joy to mine.